Here at Energy Media, we spend a lot of time talking to experts about electric vehicle adoption, and particularly, we're interested in when sales will hit the inflection point on the S curve, essentially when the sales curve will start looking like the shaft of a hockey stick, and they start, rising rather rapidly. So we're going to talk to Ram Chandrasekaran, who is the principal of global e-mobility and transportation with Wood Mackenzie. So welcome to the interview, Ram.
Hey, Mark, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, you and I talk the same language in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, and you recently wrote a blog post about whether electric vehicles are on the fast track to adoption. Maybe give us an overview of that post, please.
Right. So, if you think about EV adoption as a matter of, an innovation being diffused amongst the global population, you need to view sort of the consumer base as the groups that are going to adopt this piece of technology. And you have your early adopters and your innovators who are sort of the people who will jump onto a new piece of technology as quickly as possible. Some of them are going to buy an EV just because, hey, it's cool, it's different, it's something to brag about, something to tell your friends that you're doing differently than them. They're great. They're your champions to diffuse a particular piece of technology, but they're also a very small group of people, right? To get to that point that you're talking about, the inflection point, sort of where the adoption is really going to expand, but who you need to get is the early majority. The folks that are kind of just looking for a nice car to drive. Maybe they don't care about internal combustion engines. Maybe they don't care about electric cars. They just want a nice car, right? And to get to that group, one of the signposts that Wood Mackenzie looks at is achieving 4% stock of electric vehicle. And why 4% stock is, it boils down to, we look at, any regular person can have 150 people in their circle of friends, family, and acquaintances. And out of that 150 people, we're expecting 2 of them to have an electric car by the time we get to 4% stock. And when we get there, the idea is then you know someone who has an electric car, so you're willing to give it a shot, and that's when the inflection point comes in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because the theory talks about how diffusions, new innovations spread amongst users. They talk to each other and compare notes, right, and so on. So once you've got enough of these adopters out in the marketplace, then it just makes sense that the adoption will speed up. So are we at 4% of the vehicle stock yet?
In the US, we're not even close. In North America, we're still a strong ways away from that. At the moment, in 2020, we saw about 2.5% of sales being electric vehicles, which puts us at less than 1% of stock being electric vehicles. So we have a long ways to go before we get a real inflection point. But the good news is that we're starting to see policy help coming in to compress that curve of adoption that'll really push us towards 4% stock, and then let it take organic growth.
Now, I've had an opportunity to interview a number of battery scientists and analysts recently, and cost, of course, is one of the impediments, one of the barriers to adoption. And battery packs are a big part of an electric vehicle's cost. They're now at $137 a kilowatt hour. In a couple of years, it'll be $100 a kilowatt hour, the threshold for cost parity between internal combustion engine and electric vehicles. What role does that reduction in cost of batteries play in the how quickly we get to the inflection point?
Right. Now, I for one I'm glad that people are talking about cost of battery packs and how it's going to be involved in EV adoption. But I'm not a strong believer that that's going to be the primary driver, because a bulk of that cost reduction has already happened. As late as 2010, battery pack prices were at about $1,000 per kilowatt hour. And as you said, they're at about 130-ish right now. And $100 is somewhat viewed as the magic number after which EV adoption is going to explode. Now, one of the main reasons that that has been a problem is, a battery pack alone is about quarter of the cost of making an electric car. Now, if you think about, compared to an internal combustion car, there's no single piece within an ICE car that represents 25% of the vehicle cost, right? So battery cost being so high is why, we're talking about how battery price is going to be the magic number that pushes EV adoption higher, right? But there's a couple of factors here. As EV battery pack costs start coming down, vehicle prices are going to start coming down, but they're also going to be profitable to sell each of those cars. Tesla specifically has said they've been profitable with all Model 3s. VW says they'll be profitable from the first ID3 that they manufacture. That's great. Profitability is great. But compared to an ICE, they're still less profitable, and they'll likely continue to be less profitable even at $100 per kilowatt hour. But what it gives them is the ability to meet the regulatory demands, right? When you don't meet your CO2 requirements from the government, you are going to be penalized quite strongly, and selling EVs is going to help you stay within your CO2 limits. And if you can sell the product profitably while saving a bunch of regulatory costs, that's how EVs become competitive at that price point.
So we've got declining EV costs, and we know that the levelized cost of driving for an EV is already less than an internal combustion engine. So the trends are really clear. Really what we're talking about now here is, when is it likely to happen? Will it be mid 2020s, late 2020s, early 2030s? So what would be your best guess for that?
Right, and that is a regional. The answer to that is very regional. In Europe, it's already getting there because they have high regulatory costs. They have stringent emissions regulations. In the U.S., especially in the last few years, we've taken a step backwards in terms of emissions regulations, which sort of brings down your regulatory costs. But between the new policies as well as the declining costs, mid 2020s is what Wood Mackenzie projects will be the start of the tipping point for the United States.
Well, this has got to be exciting times then, because that's only 4 years away. And I would, last question, Ram, I'm really curious. What role does the recent announcements by the automakers about transitioning to electric car manufacturing play? I mean, we see, Volkswagen commits 50 billion, GM's going to be that sort of thing. Is that just one more signpost that we're headed towards inflection in 2025?
Right. I think, all announcements are not equal, right? For example, GM's announcement was that they aspire to be all electric by 2035. Really vague terminology. You can't really hold someone against an aspiration. But what I do see is that all the announcements that you're coming through is sort of a response, a reaction. One of the byproducts of the general direction the industry is heading in, and the general direction that the world is heading in terms of regulations and carbon neutrality. So if the goal is to reduce CO2, and most of the world governments are aiming to reduce CO2, what you see is a reaction of the automakers trying to sort of get with that program, or in some cases, get ahead of that curve, right? VW specifically tried to get ahead of that curve. Tesla has been ahead of the curve for a while. And, the whole industry in general is trying to push towards carbon neutrality. And the strongest lever to do that is electric vehicles.
Ram, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great to be here.